Yes,
Is
Coco.
everyone here? Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is an informal dialogue with all of you who contribute to the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform at the UNFCCC. We're really glad to have this time together. It's a really busy time coming up. Our sessions are starting next week, and we hope to see many, if not all of you at those meetings, and there's lots of other really important things coming up. So the purpose of this meeting is to slow things down just a little bit, provide some information. We understand some of you have some questions, almost like frequently asked questions. So the Secretariat wanted to respond to those. And then we want to leave most of the time actually to you to have this dialogue. And Graham Reed has kindly agreed to be the first person to hop in on that dialogue. So we'll actually get started. And my name is Coco Warner. I'm here at the UNFCCC. I'm a manager of the sub-program that supports the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform and its constituted body, which is called, or committee, that's the facilitative working group. We're going to explain how it all fits together. But maybe to begin, when you understand the main idea that I hope that we can convey and strengthen together with you is that by understanding how the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform and all of its work fits into this bigger picture, not just climate policy, but hopefully we can contribute to the important work that you all do in the world. There's almost nothing that we can't achieve together. I also wanted just to acknowledge the long road and the struggles of the Indigenous peoples organizations and many of their allies in bringing us to this point. It's largely because of you and your hard work over these many, many years, decades, I'd say, and working closely with countries who care about your values and the huge leadership that you play in climate change and many other realms. We really just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for bringing us to this point. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. And so we don't want to stop here, but we want to continue into the future with your voices. So maybe a leading question is, what's happening under the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform between basically the next 6 months from now until the end of the year? We're going to be talking about that. And maybe to get started, some housekeeping, which I forgot. Chad, could you go to the next slide? And I'll just tell you what the housekeeping slide, Chad, please. Or if not, then I can just tell you a little bit of housekeeping, which I can do. We're going to have two parts of our discussion here. We don't have interpretation for this particular event, but we are recording the event and we'll share that link so that you can listen to it at your own convenience. The beginning part is about us responding to some questions that we've heard, and then that will be followed by an interactive kind of a dialogue with all of you. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the chat box. Put your name if you want to speak, or you can also just put your question and your comment there. We'll be monitoring that chat box and we'll come to that. That'll be the bulk of what we do today. If you're joining the live stream via YouTube, unfortunately, the chat function isn't available to you, but I'm sure you have lots of friends who are participating live in this event, and you can always ask them to relay your question. Your questions are really important to us. You can also always write to us. We're the Secretariat. We support the work of Indigenous peoples and local communities here in climate policy. And our email address is lcipp@unfccc.int. And I'd ask one of the team members to drop that in the chat box. So what is the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform? This is an open and inclusive space. It brings you together as well as country representatives. We call them parties. To share your experiences about adaptation and mitigation And ultimately, what we're trying to do is by including the values and voices and experiences of Indigenous peoples and local communities, we see that as a great contribution to building a climate resilient future for all people. Next slide, please. So here's the mandate and a little bit of timeline. As all of you know, your journey has gone on much longer before the Secretariat and all of us met. I've heard Chief Thomas say that this has been a journey of 40 years or maybe much, much longer. So just acknowledging that. But where the UNFCCC process and Indigenous people came together is just one point that I'm mentioning. At COP21 in 2015, that was also the COP that created the Paris Agreement, the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform was created. And what you see here on the screen is the decision. It's paragraph 135, and you can read it right there. I won't read it out, but you see some of the spirit of the work, sharing of experiences, responding to climate change, sharing of practices in a holistic and integrated manner. And this was the opening of the door. And then 2 years later, so the platform was first established. And what usually happens in the UNFCCC process, Chad, you can go to the next slide. What often happens in our process is that a mechanism or a platform or some kind of institution is created. And then the next year or so, the functions of that platform or mechanism or whatever, that institution is then articulated. And these, what you see on the screen now, are the 3 functions of the platform. The platform should enhance knowledge, it should build capacity for engagement, and it should contribute to climate change policies and actions. Now, an institution with functions is a great thing, but it doesn't yet live. It doesn't yet have life and a work plan and all of the activities, and it didn't yet have you. So the very next year, this would bring us up to 2018 at COP24 in Poland. All of you, or most of you, helped create a committee that would help further this work. And that committee, we call them in our world, we call them constituted bodies. That committee is called the Facilitative Working Group. And that Facilitative Working Group, or FWG, supports the platform. And the FWG breathes life into this platform, because without people, an institution doesn't really go anywhere. It's just on paper. So the FWG, together with all of you, as again, I keep saying this over and over, it really breathes life and brings meaning and activity and momentum into the work. So many of you have asked, what's the difference between the platform and the committee or the FWG? It's exactly what I just said. The platform is like an umbrella. It's a receptacle or an institution, if you will. It has functions. And the FWG is the committee. It's very special. I think we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But that's the thing that actually puts a human face to it. And you have leaders there who are listening to you and serving you and making things happen. And this is all under the UNFCCC. So here's the big picture. Right at the top, you have what for the UNFCCC, which is, by the way, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So that's the umbrella. It's an agreement of all countries, almost all countries in the world, going all the way back to the early 1990s. And that conference of the party, or COP, is all parties coming together. That's the supreme decision-making body. And so when you see those mandates, it will say COP or CP. That's a decision. All of the bodies come together. Now, the COP itself doesn't have voting rules. That means that parties reach decisions by consensus. Everybody has to agree. And it's really hard work. But once parties agree, they've agreed all together. So enough said about the COP. There are 2 subsidiary bodies. So you see this next level of this, almost looks like an organogram. This next level down, there are 2 what we call subsidiary bodies. And you have a bunch of parties or countries that meet on each. I'm going to say what those acronyms mean. You can see it written small here. the one that the work of the FWG, that committee that supports the platform, that sits under the Subsidiary Body for Science and Technical Advice. And that's not that surprising because a lot of the work that's going on with Indigenous peoples and local communities has to do with your very unique knowledge and experiences. So the next level down are these committees, and there are lots of different topics that these committees support. Of course, you know the FWG, that's you, Indigenous people and local communities. There's an adaptation committee, there's a standing committee on finance, there's a technology committee, and so on and so forth. The FWG is one of 15 committees underneath the Unfccc process. So you have FWG that has each one of these committees, by the way, is attached to a mechanism. So, for example, well, that would be too much detail, but the FWG has a meeting coming up. We're going to tell you that in just a little bit. It writes a report of that meeting, and that meeting report then gets considered by the substa. And you're also going to hear that we have our mid-year meetings coming up. So the substa and the SPI start meeting next week. And what you'll usually see is you'll see the constituted bodies meeting. What they do feeds into the subsidiary bodies. The subsidiary bodies consider all of that work, and they make recommendations to the COP. And ultimately, then the COP decides. I hope that's not too much information. Maybe many of you are familiar. If any of this sounds like Greek, then just write to me and we'll go through it on a one-on-one basis. So Chad, next slide, please. This is our committee, and you know so many of them. Chad, I think I'll pass the baton now to you to introduce the work of the facilitative working group and the work plan. Over to you, Chad.
Thank you, Coco. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Coco was mentioning earlier, the local communities and the Indigenous peoples platform is really an open and inclusive space that brings together people and their experiences to build a climate resilient world for all. You may wonder, how does the platform do it? How does it realize the openness and inclusivity? How does it bring together people and their experiences? So in the next couple of minutes, you will learn about not only the progress made under the current initial 2-year work plan, but also I hope it will show you how the local community and the Indigenous peoples platform is an open and inclusive space. The facilitative working group of the Lcipp, as the name suggests, facilitates the implementation of the 3 functions that Coco shared. The platform essentially does 3 things as its core functions. One, it promotes the exchange of experiences, good practices to address climate change. And 2, it helps to build capacity. The capacity, not only the capacity of Indigenous peoples and local communities to engage in the Unfccc process, but also to build the capacity of parties and other entities who are looking to engage with Indigenous peoples, local communities, as well as the platform. And then finally, the 3rd function is to harness the power of diverse knowledge systems to inform the design and the implementation of climate change policies and actions. The FWG has an equal number of Indigenous peoples representatives and party representatives to facilitate the implementation of the 3 functions. In 2019, early 2019, the Secretariat has invited Indigenous peoples, local communities, and other relevant entities to share their views as what can go into the initial 2-year work plan that is related to the 3 functions that I just mentioned. In June 2019, the FWG convened its first meeting, and out of that meeting came a draft initial 2-year work plan with 12 activities. And the work plan was later welcomed by the parties in December 2019. Here, I'll briefly go through the 12 activities to sort of give you a sense what these activities are and where we are in terms of the implementation status, and how it engages Indigenous peoples, local communities, parties, as well as other relevant entities. Under the knowledge function, there are 3 activities. And what you will see is you will see the activities alongside the activities, you see the names of FWG members who co-leads these activities. Activity 1 is an annual thematic meeting. And this one, the first one will take place in conjunction with COP26. The regional gatherings focuses on the threats to and the impact on the specific ecosystems from climate change and on sustaining livelihood. There would have been at least one such gathering per year. The global pandemic prevented the organization of the regional gatherings, a direct engagement of in the knowledge holders and the practitioners, the co-leads and the co-chairs of the FWG deemed that it requires the gatherings to take place in in-person setting, and therefore the regional gatherings were delayed, but hopefully it will be convened over the coming months and years. The third activity of the initial 2-year work plan focuses on Indigenous curricula. What does that mean? It focuses on identifying and disseminating information about the development and use of Indigenous curricula and the materials, knowledge, language, in whether that's informal or informal in the education systems, particularly focusing on materials that promotes the knowledge of Indigenous peoples, traditional knowledge, local knowledge systems in the context of climate change. Under the second function of the LCIPP, which is to build capacity for engagement, there are 3 activities as well. Activity 4 focuses on building the capacity of Indigenous peoples, local communities, as well as parties and other entities, as mentioned earlier. And here, in end of last year and the beginning of this year, the co-leads, with the support of the Secretariat, have convened a series of training webinars on issues including ethical and equitable engagement of Indigenous knowledge in the context of climate change. If you have missed the training sessions, no worries, you can check out the recordings from those sessions, and those are made available to you through the Lcipp Web Portal, which my colleague Nina will speak more about later in the program. Activity 5 has 2 components, and the part 1 is it has an outreach and this dissemination plan. And the second one is develop thematic training materials. The outreach and the dissemination plan essentially focuses on raising awareness about the work that is undertaken under the LCIPP, but also to make it easier for contributors like yourself to engage with the Lcip. Activity 6 then brings in the experiences that's for not only the activities that I shared earlier, but also activities that will come in the subsequent slides, as well as the experiences before the development of the initial 2-year work plan, and put forward a set of recommendations on the engagement and inputs of Indigenous peoples and local communities across Unfccc. And the set of recommendations will be accompanied with a guiding document as how these recommendations can be implemented. The third function focuses on climate policies and actions, what it really means is to bring together diverse knowledge systems to enhance the coherence of climate policies and actions. Here, there are 6 activities, and you will see a number of mapping efforts. Activity 7 looks at the existing policies and practices for the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities under and outside of the Unfccc. And here, what we've done is we under the co-lead, the guidance of the co-lead, we put together a technical paper. The paper is currently under development, and once it's finalized, will be made available, and that brings together the existing policies, practices, as well as some of the opportunities and gaps for the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in informing the climate policies and actions. Activity 8, in May 2018, Indigenous elder Chief Frank opened the first activity of the LCIPP, and he sang a ceremonial song composed by Indigenous women praising water And the participant took a sip of water from their glasses or bottles as a symbol to create a community. And the first activity is a multi-stakeholder workshop. And that tradition continued in 2018, 2019. And this will continue at COP26. There will be a multi-stakeholder workshop, in-session workshop to engage the LCIPP community. Activity 9 is another mapping effort. This one looks at the existing policies and actions and communications under the convention in relation to how the needs and priorities of indigenous peoples and local communities are considered in such policies, practices, and communications. That leads us to activity 10. National climate policies and actions are essential to meet the Paris climate goals. Indigenous peoples in the local communities play an important role. And so activity 10 looks at what are some of the good practices that facilitates the participation of indigenous peoples and the local communities in national climate policies. And this will be compiled in a document, and also worth noting that there will be an in-session dialogue that's coming up on 3rd of June at between 6 to 7:30 in the European time. So we hope to see you all there. And activity 11, now noticing the implementation of these activities resource is a prerequisite. So the FWG dedicated an activity to look at what are the existing funding opportunities. And so activity 11 conducted a survey as well as interviews to see what are some of the funding opportunities within the UN system, as well as additional funding opportunities. And the results are made available to you in a synthesis document that is also made available on the LCIPP pages and the portal, which my colleague will present next. And the activity 12, so the final activity is promoting the LCIPP at the national and regional level. It is worth noting that some of these activities, including activity 3, the indigenous curricula, and activity 12 are currently under implementation. So if you are interested, you have any questions about these, or if you are interested to contribute, do let us know. And again, my colleague Nina will show you next what are some of the ways to engage. As you can see, the development as well as the implementation of this activity is really rooted in a participatory journey where we invite indigenous peoples, local communities, parties to share their views and to participate in dialogues, events, and to collaborate. And the implementation of this work plan activities are very much based on collaborations. So I think with that, I'm going to hand the screen to Nina.
Perfect. Thank you, Chad. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of our recently launched LCIPP web portal and show you how you can engage directly on the portal and some of the features that, some of what the portal features. So one moment. Right, apologies. Sorry, 1 second. I just have to update my systems, preferences. So sorry, Chad or Joanna, would you be able to jump in and share your screen? Unfortunately, my system preferences are not open at the moment.
Sure, Nina, let me, okay, Joanna, you're on too. So let's try to share the portal.
If it's not working, we could go to the next section and I could do the next couple slides and then come back to the portal. Would that be best?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so Chad, if you just want to put up back the slides, then I can go into the next bit. So great. Well, it's great to see some familiar names on the participant list there. So hello to everyone, and thanks for joining us. So I'm going to just talk a bit about what's ahead, what's coming up. Chad walked us through the activities under the initial 2-year work plan. And so if we can put up the slide that has a timeline there, Chad. There's a timeline showing kind of where the various work under the activities falls. I'll just see if we can get that up. I'm not seeing it. Do you, Chad, are you seeing, is it on your screen?
I am sharing it now. We
Oh,
just,
okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. All right. So once that slide comes up, great, perfect, here we go. So you'll see June is a very busy month. Coco mentioned at the beginning, there's lots of really key opportunities in June, and Chad has also spoken a bit about them that are coming up in relation to the Lcip and the work plan activities. So there's 2 Lcip events that will be held in June during the first sessional period of 2021. There's the in-session dialogue on Indigenous peoples and local community participation in national climate policy under activity 10. And then there's also the launch event for the portal. And in June, we have FWG5 at the end of the month. And then in November, we have COP26. And alongside that, the FWG6 meeting will be held. And that will also be the time at which the 2 mandated events to correspond with COP26 will happen that Chad mentioned. He mentioned the annual meeting and the multi-stakeholder workshop. And then we'll wrap up the initial Lcip 2-year work plan. And so, Chad, if you can go to the next slide. Then a second work plan that spans 3 years may follow, and that depends on the COP decision and the review of the Lcip and the facilitator working group. And the discussions at FWG5 will contribute to developing this second 3-year work plan. So if you can go to the next slide there, Chad. Thanks so much. FWG5, the 5th meeting of the facilitator working group, you can expect 3 major items to be covered at this meeting. The co-chairs of the FWG will change for a 3rd and final time during their 3-year term, or the 3-year term of the FWG members. So there will be new co-chairs and new vice co-chairs nominated both on the party side and on the Indigenous people's side. And then the new co-chairs will facilitate the FWG5 meeting as well as the FWG6 meeting. The second major item that will be covered at the meeting is that the activities in the initial Lcip work plan will be reviewed. And the co-leads that we saw them up on the slides earlier that Chad presented, all the co-leads will speak to their activities. They'll go through, update on progress under each activity, share what they would like to see carried forward. And that's going to be a great opportunity to really get a full picture of where the work plan is at, the status of the activities, and to think about what goes into the next work plan. And then that takes us to the 3rd major item for the meeting, which is collecting input for the draft second work plan that will again span 3 years. So to prepare for the FWG5 meeting, you can check out the web portal, and we'll go back to that after this. Hopefully we can get the screen shared so that Nina can walk you through it. But on the web portal, you can review all the activities that will be discussed. You can see the concept notes. You can see any documents that are already available that have been created under activities so that you're prepared knowing about the activities that will be discussed. And you can come prepared with questions or comments related to those activities, because that will be a big bulk of the meeting. We really, as Chad mentioned, we really also encourage you to take note of ongoing activities where there's still time to provide input and contribute in different ways. So for example, activity 3 on Indigenous knowledge and climate change in curriculum, there'll be a call for input. Same with activity 12 on national and regional climate platforms. So those are examples where, yeah, you can still provide input that can go into the formal deliverables. And then the process within the FWG to create that second work plan has begun and is going to provide lots of time and space for the FWG members to gather and submit input into creating that work plan. So we really encourage everyone to get in touch directly with your representative on the FWG. And if you don't know who that is, on the web portal, there's a list of all the representatives. And then they can also, you can share with them your comments and ideas for the draft work plan, and they can bring that to the development of that work plan. So after FWG5, a meeting report will be prepared, and that will capture the outcomes of the activities in the FWG over the last several years. And then the initial work plan will also be reported on, and the outcomes of that initial work plan. That report will go to Substa along with the second 3-year work plan that will be annexed, and then that will be reviewed at COP26. And so then that brings us to COP26 and what's mandated for November and for the Lcip at COP26. As mentioned, a review of the FWG will take place and a consideration of that new work plan. So Substa will review the outcomes and activities of the FWG, taking into account the FWG 5 report, and then forward a draft decision to the COP that will decide if the mandate of the FWG is extended and if the second work plan is adopted. That decision will also take into consideration any other elements from recommendations by the FWG developed under activities as appropriate. And then again, there'll be the 2 mandated events at COP26, which will be the annual thematic meeting and the in-session multi-stakeholder dialogue. So those will be the 2 Lcip events held during COP26. So just to quickly recap, register for the Lcip events that are happening during the first sessional period of 2021. That's May 31st to June 17th. June 3rd is the in-session dialogue on Indigenous and local community participation in national climate policy. June 10th is the web portal event. And then also register for FWG 5. That's happening June 21st to the 24th. And I just wanted to note the in-session dialogue on June 3rd. It's going to be a great opportunity to share input and your experiences on how Indigenous peoples and local communities participate in national climate policy in your country and what good practices for participation look like. So please definitely register, come prepared to talk. There'll be lots of time for sharing and for dialogue. So we really hope that everyone is able to present or to participate in that. And with that, I will hand it back to Nina, and hopefully we've got the portal up and running.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So as Chad and Joanna have both mentioned, we have our recently launched LCIPP web portal. We'll put the link to the portal in the chat box for you to follow along. But one of the main ways that we wanted to go through today were ways to engage. So if you click on this button here on the far right corner, and notice just above, you can change the language of the portal as well. You have the ways that you can engage with this portal. So there are several different ways to do this. There's participating in LCIPP events, which both Chad and Joanna have mentioned. We have several upcoming in June. So if you click on this link, you'll be taken to a page, which is our event calendar, which is also on the main page of the web portal. And here you can go through and see all of our upcoming events. You can also register for them, and you can look through events based on exactly what you're looking for. And there'll also be events that you are able to submit. So here you see you can submit an event. And then beyond events, we also have the ability to submit a resource, which will be coming soon. You can also subscribe to our latest resources and subscribe to latest events. Similarly, you can respond to a call for submission, which I will also walk through in one moment. But some other key areas of the web portal to keep in mind are the 7 UN Indigenous Sociocultural regions. So if you go to these pages, every region has a designated page. And on this page, we have our members of the region outlined, but also we have areas for you to contribute to. So listing organizations of relevant IPOs in the region, and also related resources that you will be able to upload through the Ways to Engage page that I just mentioned. So similarly, in addition to the activities that Joanna was speaking about, you can also look at our work plan and find our activities here that are upcoming. So for example, we have activity 10, which if you scroll down, you can find the details of activity 10 here. And when you click on this button, you can see the related documents that Joanna mentioned. So for example, the concept note version March 22 here to download and look through. You also have the key outlines of the activity, including the deliverables and the function mandated in the work plan, along with potential partnerships as well. Similarly, for activities that have already had a significant action under them, such as activity 4, when you go to activity 4 to see details, you can look up our annual thematic training workshops, and here you can find access to these workshops, where you can also find the recordings to watch live in case you have missed them. So one other part to note is when we have our activities to submit to them, you do this through the UNFCCC submissions portal, of which we'll also put the link to in the chat. So on the UNFCCC submissions portal, to get to LCIPP activities, of which there's a call for submissions, you'll click on this search bar and type in LCIPP. And when you go through, you'll find the 6 call for submissions that we currently have. And this is how you go through and directly submit. Our submissions are absolutely vital to all of our activities because they inform the content of the activities. So we invite you to look through our activities on our web portal and also make submissions as you are able to. If you have any further questions regarding the web portal, we're more than happy to answer during the Q&A moderated discussion in the second half. And thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
Wonderful. I hope everybody's still there. Are you all okay? We've just given you so much information. Some of the typical questions, all of you have been so kind to invite the Secretariat to caucus meetings or to IASG meetings or a number of network meetings where you talk about Indigenous people and local communities, topics and interests and questions have come up that we've tried to address so far. And we've done it in typical Secretariat style with the PowerPoint, with the chart, with all of these kinds of things. Now would actually like to put a human face to it. So how was that helpful? And maybe Graham, I could turn to you. I also know, Graham, that your time's a little bit limited. Thank you so much for staying with us. Graham, what are you hearing and how can the Secretariat be helpful in this important work? What else are you hearing? What would you like to say? Over to you, Graham, if you're there still.
Yep. Thanks, Coco, Anine, and good morning, everybody. It's good to join this virtual circle from Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh lands, what's currently known in some contexts as Vancouver. Just looking at the participant list, it's a good turnout and good to see all of you who have been involved, and welcome for those that haven't been involved in the last little while. When we first talked about organizing a session like this, the intention was really to focus on what I think Chad, Joanna, and Nina talked about, which is what are the materials being considered at the upcoming FWG session, and how can we make sure that our Indigenous representatives are prepared in the best capacity possible to contribute to those different sessions. And hopefully through, for example, the discussion by Joanna, you see that there are opportunities, but that part of it is making sure that those opportunities and perspectives are registered in the differing reports that are coming out of those. You know, I wanted to comment on a few things that just might be relevant for the dialogue and questions and answers that we might have. The first is just the recognition that you know, not all Indigenous issues within the UNFCCC are dealt with in the context of the FWG nor the platform. And so through the Indigenous Caucus, we continue to stay involved in the breadth of different things that are occurring within the UNFCCC, and we'll continue to do that, especially, for example, through this upcoming virtual session, which I think is important to do that. And to make sure that we recognize that there are these distinct modules for Indigenous peoples to advance, you know, the safeguarding of their rights. And, you know, one of the points that you made, Coco, was the importance of Indigenous knowledge systems, but also, you know, the caucus is kind of emphatic about the protection and upholding of our rights. And we have that included in the chapeau of the work plan. Nina also pointed to it in the web portal. We want to make reference to the rights-based language on the arrival of the web portal to make sure that any content is protected. And of course, the obligations that parties have within the preambular text of the Paris Agreements itself, recognizing the importance of safeguarding the rights of Indigenous peoples, as well as you know, full and effective participation. And I think one of the points that wanted to share was just the opportunity that the FWG presents for ongoing participation of Indigenous peoples, and the important linkages that it has to other constituted bodies that could help maintain that Indigenous voice in these other bodies that have traditionally excluded us systematically from participating. The final thing that I just wanted to share, and I'm excited to have this back and forth, is the kind of importance of ongoing dialogue, and also making sure that we take advantage of the upcoming events that enable concerns from Indigenous peoples to be raised and to be registered in the formal record. Joanna referenced a few things, including the report from FWG, the enhancement of the second, third year work plan, which we can see that many of those activities that we have progressed on over the last 3 years would potentially roll into that new one, which offers new opportunity to continue that exposure, and just the ongoing importance of, for example, activity 6 associated with concrete recommendations to improve the engagement of Indigenous peoples within the UNFCCC. And all of these together, are opportunities to continue that momentum and continue the participation of Indigenous peoples as nations. I do hope, and as Coco said, I have to jump off in about 15 minutes, but I hope that, this is the start of the conversation to figure out tools that we can, through the Secretariat, support Indigenous participation, support the kind of free, prior, and informed component of free, prior, and informed consent, which is to say, what is the information required to support the participation of our Indigenous relatives within the formal sessions of, for example, the facilitative working group or otherwise. And so, really see this as an opportunity to kind of test a modality of informality working together, and then continue to see how we can, maintain that momentum to continue up to COP26 and onward. So I'm going to stop there. Say to miigwech, everyone, and look forward to the discussion.
Graham, thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate those thoughts. And also, you've been engaged for as long as I have, and I'm a relative newcomer to our discussion. So really appreciate that very much. And for everyone, I hope that you can teach us as the Secretariat. There's a lot that we don't know, or at least I'll say that I don't know. And whatever we can do to support you in your work, let's keep that conversation going. Thanks a lot for that, Graham. We have a speakers list, and the way it works is if you'd like to say something using your microphone, just put your name in the chat. Nina's helping me keep track of those who've said they'd like to hop in. Pasang is the first person that I've seen. And then Ricardo made a comment in the chat. Ricardo, if you want me to read it out, I'm happy to do it. But if you'd like, you're also welcome to follow Pasang. While Pasang is putting on her microphone, if any of you would like to ask questions or comments, can be like Graham commented or something completely different, just feel free to do that. Put your name in the chat box and then we'll go on to you. Thanks. Pasang, over to you. And we'll just wait just one moment. Pasang, there you are. Please hop on in.
Coco, I have very internet bad connection here. I hardly hear from you. Can you please go on with other friends? Because
sure.
Internet connection is very bad. I hardly hear from you. And also...
Okay. Yep, understood. Thanks, Pasang. Ricardo, please hop on in.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Ricardo. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. No, in fact, I was just putting a comment, which is also a kind of question on the process and the nature of the process, to the extent that we are, just experiencing a new modality of work with these virtual conversations. So I wanted just to get a little bit more clarity from the Secretariat on what the nature of this meeting is being considered as, and how are we going to ensure that the outcomes of the different dialogues that are going to be implemented during these negotiations are going to be transmitted into the more formal negotiations coming later on, during the COP, or if there is going to be a second part of the intersessionals in person. What is the latest information that you have on that? And in order, in particular for those who are not very familiar with the process, be more clear on what to expect from all this, to my understanding, still informal conversations. That's not quite my question. Thank you.
Those are excellent. Thank you. And Ricardo, if you could just hang with me for a minute to make sure. I've been taking some notes, but just to make sure that I am getting your questions right. I heard 3 questions. The first was, what's this thing that we're doing on the 27th of May right now? I heard a question of how does the discussion that we're having, or that the FWG has coming up at FWG 5, how does that fit into the negotiations? And the third, I think, was about a little bit more towards Glasgow. Ricardo, did I understand your questions correctly?
Yes. From this, I am more or less clear from this, specific meeting. But there are going to be other opportunities to engage.
That's right.
In the forthcoming weeks.
Yep.
And that my main question is on that. How are we going to capture the different progress that we make during those conversations, and how they will fit into the forthcoming more formal negotiations, being that the COP or whatever they decide to organize.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. And Ricardo, you know a lot about our process. So I'm going to tell you the way that I'm going to switch into Secretariat kind of language. That might not make a lot of sense to others. So if you need me to repeat or to use more language that any normal person would understand, then just please let me know. Happy to do that. And Andrea, after I finish, I see your hand is up. So don't worry, we're coming to you and we see you. So Ricardo really pointed out some important opportunities coming up. And so many of you are part of a constituency of the UNFCCC called the Indigenous Peoples Organizations, IPOs. Some of you are members of other constituencies, and some of you are parties. Constituencies have a slightly different role than parties. Parties are the negotiators, and they represent countries and groups of countries. For those of you who have watched the UNFCCC process for a while, you're probably familiar with that. Constituencies, like the Indigenous Peoples Organizations, as you know, you're part of it, play a really important role. You bring in questions, you bring in technical information and knowledge. You also advocate for things that are really important to you and the people that you represent. So what are some opportunities coming up? And Joanna, I'm going to repeat some of the things that you shared earlier. On Monday, our first kind of virtual session is going to begin. And there's a whole special way to refer to this. In the normal world, when we don't have a pandemic, there's a kind of cycle to the UNFCCC. And I'm going to link it. If you remember that organogram that I shared many minutes ago, at the very, very top, you have the Conference of the Parties, the supreme decision-making body. They make the decisions. And then there are the subsidiary bodies, SBSTA and SBI. I'm sorry for the acronyms. And then you have the constituted bodies. And each one of these bodies has a cycle, and they feed into each other. So let's start with FWG. That's one of our committees or constituted bodies. Typically, the committees, I'm just going to use that word because it's more normal. But sorry? got muted. Here we go. So the committees meet twice a year. Some of them meet in the first quarter. FWG meets back to back with the SBs. Usually, we usually meet in conjunction. Those constituted body meetings do all kinds of things. They do activities. It's usually technical in nature, often interacting with technical experts like all of yourselves. And they feed that work into the SBs. And those SBs, the subsidiary bodies, SB, take place twice a year as well. They usually take place in June, and they usually take place also in conjunction with the COP. So first of all, committees, they meet twice a year, usually in the first quarter or right before the SBs, and then again in the fall, or in our case with FWG, right before that end of year session. The constituted body meeting, their committee work, feeds into those subsidiary bodies. And those subsidiary bodies, they bring parties in. That's where negotiations happen. And parties look at the work and they negotiate and they prepare things. Sometimes they make decisions there, but they also prepare things for the end of the year when that decision-making body, the supreme decision-making body, the COP in this case, meets and make decisions. So then at the end of the year, you have that big meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and many of you have participated. So that's the cycle. So Ricardo asked, what are your opportunities to get involved, to contribute? And also, Ricardo, that second question was, what's this virtual subsidiary body meeting about? So first of all, how do you get involved and where can you contribute? Where do your thoughts really get leverage? So the one thing is, in a decision-making cycle like this, it's a whole year. And essentially every couple of months, there's one of these meetings that are really important. Participate in the constituted body meetings. Please participate in the upcoming FWG 5. We're listening to the co-chairs, Andrea and Yo. We're listening to the FWG members, like I'm looking at Pasang and Hindu, I see you. They really have encouraged the Secretariat to make ample time for you to speak and share your views. And that's so valuable. So please contact us, get registered for that. That's a time when your ideas can really make a difference. This upcoming FWG is really exciting, not only because together with you, FWG5 has been working full out on all of these activities that Chad explained. So there's a ton of work going on. And we need your reflections. What's been good? What would you like to see more of, for example? What do you think isn't so useful? But what's happening, as you know, is that there's a mandate for FWG to devise the next work plan. So this is really a moment to look out to the horizon and extend the work and say, okay, what should be in the next work plan? And obviously your ideas make a huge difference. Andrea may say something about that. So that's specifically about that work of Indigenous peoples and local communities in this platform. More broadly, and this is something that Graham said, your views are important in many, many agenda items. And so how do you get involved? Next week, as I said, our session begins. It's all virtual. You do need to register. It's like a 2 registration process, so you need to be accredited. So make sure and talk to Wissam about that. She can help you get in the door. And then there are individual sessions. There are events like what Joanna talked about, and then there are negotiation sessions where parties will come together and talk about a variety of things. This session is going to be long. In this first block, and again, there's a special way to refer to this, but this first block is going to be 3 weeks long. And we're going to be meeting in all kinds of hours because all of us are spread all around the world. So it's a lot of information to take on, but find out what are the agenda items that you care about and find out when those sessions happen and listen in. That's one thing to be informed. There may be an ongoing virtual session. I don't have very much information about it, so I'll just stop there. But Ricardo, you asked how progress will be recorded. It's been communicated to us by the Bureau That's another detail. I can tell you all about the Bureau, but don't worry about it. It's been communicated to us that parties are not yet comfortable making decisions in an online format. They want to be together. They want to be together in Glasgow. So in order to make progress, this virtual session that we're headed into on Monday, it's going to happen that parties discuss. They discuss all of the issues that it's on the agenda, and the progress will be noted and captured, but no decisions will be made. All of that's going to be kind of unpacked then at Glasgow. So it doesn't mean that things aren't happening. It means that really make sure and talk to parties, talk to each other, make sure and raise your voices. And the Secretariat is listening. We're supporting the SB chairs, particularly the Substa chair, to whom FWG reports, to make sure that all of the things that you say and the issues that you record, will make sure that those get picked up so that they're not lost. So Ricardo, was that a sufficient answer? I hope that I addressed what you're talking about. Was that enough? I've talked kind of too long anyway.
Thank you. No, that was great. I think it's more clear for everyone. Thank you.
I hope I haven't confused everybody else. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Really appreciate it. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Coco, and thank you for everyone for joining. I would say this in Spanish as well, but because there's not translation, I'm assuming that those participants that don't speak English, that only speak Spanish, already have left the session. So I hope at future sessions we can provide at least, Spanish, if not some of the other languages that Indigenous peoples speak, including members of the facilitated working group. I'm the current co-chair representing the Indigenous peoples members. As Coco mentioned, there will be selection and the seating of 2 new co-chairs and new vice co-chairs. The co-chairs come from the Indigenous peoples, one of them, and one is selected by the state. So I'm not sure if my counterpart, Yo Mulalap from Small Island Developing States, is on this Zoom meeting, but I would like to recognize him and thank him for his excellent collaboration over this last year with me. I just wanted to say I'm glad that Graham highlighted the very important, in fact, essential feature of the portal, which was the rights safeguard language, which unfortunately wasn't clicked on in your presentation, but it maybe was the most important thing for the members of the facilitated working group before the launching of the portal. So I do encourage everybody to look at that we have considered how to safeguard Indigenous people's rights regarding free, prior, informed consent in the sharing of information on the portal, and that we have decided not to post any specific Indigenous people's knowledge, understanding that Indigenous people's knowledge is intergenerational, it's collective, no one person can give permission for that in our way. So we're highlighting sharing of experiences, programs, good examples of our work in this regard. If you can, check out the safeguard paragraphs, it's very important, and we did take a lot of time with input from the Indigenous caucus on that development. I just wanted to basically say one thing in response to a question that has been answered, and I think one of the most unique elements for the first time really ever in our whole 40 plus years of work at the United Nations, we have an official UN body where the representatives of Indigenous peoples are not considered independent experts. We actually represent the 7 regions, and the regions themselves selected the members of the facilitative working group. So we're there as representatives and not as independent experts, say like on the UN Permanent Forum or the MRIP, which also have, of course, Indigenous members. But I want to say that the development of the work plan, the original 2-year work plan that we're still in now, took place with the input in person of many, many Indigenous peoples. And we were really challenged in talking about the development of the second work plan, which will be for 3 years, and the current members, even though we will end our term of office at the end of this year after COP26, or if I guess formally at the meeting where the new members will be seated during the Substa next year, but this will be our last formal meeting that will take place. We are charged with developing the new work plan that the incoming members will implement. So it's kind of a difficult process, but nevertheless, we do have a timeline that includes basically a whole 3 weeks, July 1st to July 20th, that the draft work plan, based on the work that has been accomplished so far, the input of the co-leads of the different activities, will be circulated to our regions, the Indigenous peoples that we represent, and the caucus in general. So I know that there's a caucus meeting, the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, called the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, on Sunday. And I want to be able to talk more about this. But basically, in our timeline, we have from July 1 to July 20 to get input on the draft work plan that the Secretariat will develop from all of our inputs, which I think we have till the end of this month to give this input, based on the co-leads of the different activities and whether we think they were successful, what work is left to do for the next period of time, like was mentioned with the regional gatherings that we couldn't have, that were very, very important. And I do want to recognize that our dear friend who is departed from this world was the co-lead on activity 2 with the regional gatherings with me, and did a lot of work on it. I noticed his name wasn't on there, but I just want to recognize that he did do a lot of work with me on the development of the work plan, the concept note for what we want to get out of these regional gatherings, bringing Indigenous peoples together on the ground that will need to be carried over in the next timeline. So I just wanted to say that we have figured time for input like we had last time for the development of the work plan. And hopefully we can talk more about that on the caucus meeting on Sunday. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that, Andrea. Also, your thoughtful note about Estebancio, his work is so appreciated. It's really a legacy that he's left for all of us to continue. Thank you for that. Stefan put a question in the chat box about submissions. And this relates a little bit, I'm going to just pick this up, Ricardo and Stefan. Some of you wonder, well, how do I make sure that I raise my voice? And in a process like ours, submissions are a great way for you to share your views. So what a submission is basically, it doesn't have to be very long. It can be a page. It can even be a half a page that essentially says my organization, then you put it, has this view, and then you send it in. If you can't figure out the submissions portal, don't worry, just write to the LCIPP team and we'll help you get it to the right place. But when you share your views on XYZ issue, those go on to the Unfccc website and parties can read your submissions. Other organizations can read your submissions. And it's a formal way of raising your voice and saying, this is how we think, XYZ issue could proceed. So Stefan mentioned that some of the deadlines have passed. The deadlines help us all keep moving forward, but please do, even if the deadline is passed, please do send your views, your submissions, and we'll help them get to the right place. And Chad, thanks for responding specifically to Stefan. for stuff like that, if any of you have any questions, just reach out. Our job is to help you find the door. I know that the Unfccc process sometimes can be really confusing, and you all have really busy lives and day jobs and all of those things. Okay, so far for submissions. There was also if any of you want to be included on a mailing list, the Secretariat has essentially a list of contributors, would be delighted to include you. We send out occasional information about what's going on, like this event or an upcoming deadline or an upcoming meeting that you may want to participate in. So I just saw somebody put your address in the chat. You can direct that in a private chat or just send it to us by email as you wish. Now let's see. I'm looking if we have any other people right now on the list. If we don't, we have a Menti. We have 3 questions where we would like to ask you for inputs. So Nina, could I ask you to share the Menti information? And everybody, as always, we're just always seeking your input about how we can support your work in a way that really is meaningful to you. So Nina, just give us a few moments, and Nina, over to you. So if everybody, oh, Nina, are you there? Please, over to you.
Yes, 1 second. So I put the website www.menti.com in the chat, and that's how you'll log on and participate. And I will share the Menti in 1 moment. Perfect. Can you all see my screen? So in the upper right corner, right here, we have a number. So when you go to www.menti.com, you see this number in the upper right, 21260976. And if you log on to that code, you can answer these questions live, and that way we'll have the answers from you and they'll pop up on the screen. So if you'd like to take a few moments to do this, we just have a few questions from you to gauge how we can answer these questions and move forward with the platform. Perfect. Thank you for who's written in first. Please feel free to write in your comments. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. So we have several comments coming in, including regular email updates, informal dialogues like this one, linking to constituted bodies, needing to think outside the box of traditional submission approach that the UNFCCC takes, keeping all informed about process and milestones, the importance of newsletters, listservs, social media, web portal, and events like this, informal direct exchanges between parties and friends of the platform, use of the web portal, use of normal language. We are not all native English speakers, incredibly important through collaboration and partnership. Thank you so much, everyone. Please feel free to keep sending them in. We have about 22 responses at the moment. Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for sending these in. Translation and interpretation is essential. Using tools like Menti to confirm people's understanding before starting from basics. More accessible delivery and submission, incredibly important. The importance of translation again. Great, thank you. And we have 27 responses. We'll just spend 1 more minute on this question. Then we have a few more questions for you. But similarly, if you have more questions, please feel free to write in the chat or raise your hand on the Zoom feature. Perfect. And we also have one-page summaries of key activity progress before FWG meetings. Perfect. And we have 31 replies. Thank you all so much. We'll spend just one more moment on this page. But the other great thing about Menti is that we're able to save all this information so the LCIPP team can refer back to your really, really helpful insight on how we can continue strengthening our communications and engagement mechanisms. So please, all of your thoughts, we'd love to collect them. And we'll have one more moment and then move on to the next question. There's another response on interpretation being essential in all meetings, not only English speakers, and also the importance of having easy to read materials, more focus on youth, diversity of languages, simple, regular summaries from the LCIPP team. Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for these responses. If you have any more, please plug them in, and then we'll move on to our next question. This is all the same format, so you can write in, and then the bubbles will pop up so everyone can see them. And as I mentioned, we'll have access to your responses so that we can use it to inform our work. All right, for our next question, we have, of the activities you are hearing about, what would you like to see more of? This is incredibly important for our next work plan. As mentioned, that will be a key part of FWG5. So please feel free, it should just come up on your screens now if you're on www.menti.com, and please feel free to type in your responses. One says, I would like to see more dialogue between parties and Indigenous peoples and more dialogue with the constituted bodies. Less but more focused and impactful activities that tangibly move the needle forward on Indigenous rights, knowledge, and participation. How we can contribute to the decision-making process, dialogues and interactive opportunities that bring together parties and Indigenous peoples. Oh, great, we got lots at once. Opportunities to better include regions, but also to figure out entry points for negotiations, incredibly important. Elaborate and divulgate useful and practical tools. More participatory dialogues that build trust and understanding between parties and Indigenous peoples. Integration of the LCIPP principles and main messages across the work of other bodies and work streams through regular dialogues with the view to ensure effective impact and accountability. Clear link to key negotiation items, so for example, Article 6. One says, I would like to see more to share the Indigenous values and experiences, how people experience what would be different if Indigenous views were more regularly heard in the climate discussions. Capacity building on the work of other constituted bodies and how their work relates to Indigenous peoples. More documentation of local actions that can build case studies. Perfect, and thank you all so much for sending them in. We'll have a few more moments. We have 18, so we'll maybe wait another moment or two to send in your thoughts. But as mentioned, even if they're not read aloud right now, we are collecting them all through Menti, so thank you so much for participating. Another says, find better ways to connect with what is happening locally and to international discussions. More sessions, regional dialogues where Indigenous communities can participate directly. Participation and contributions of Indigenous peoples to the Unfccc processes outside the FWG and LCIPP. Stronger participation in the decision-making process, increased access to dialogues to broader groups and to ensure the diversity of Indigenous knowledge is reflected, on strategies to ensure more accessibility on how Indigenous peoples and local communities will be part of the negotiations. Perfect, thank you. 23, so just one more moment and then we'll go on to our next question. Where applicable, less presentations and more direct interactions among parties. Activities to communicate and promote the values of Indigenous peoples, including relational approach to nature and intergenerational considerations for resource management. clear recommendations to SBs on areas of importance for Indigenous peoples, broadening the Activity 6 efforts, more interactions, activities that offer opportunities to provide recommendations that will formally be considered at Substa and COP, increase parties' knowledge on Indigenous peoples' issues and traditional knowledge, and guide them as to how they can engage Indigenous peoples in national implementation. Thank you all so much for these great responses. I'll just read one more aloud, but if you have some, please feel free to send them in the next moment or so. And finally, I love the webinars to share experience and Indigenous expertise. Okay, wonderful. My Spanish isn't great, so I won't attempt to read the Spanish ones aloud, but one last one. Connections that get the Indigenous people's voices heard more widely and broadly throughout the UNFCCC system and components. Okay, great. Thank you so much. We will be going on to our final question on the Menti. And that is, what would make it easier to contribute to Indigenous peoples and local communities' work under the UNFCCC? And just as we've done before, feel free to send them in. We'll spend a few minutes reading aloud the responses that come in, and then we'll transition back into our dialogue. So if you've seen any examples here that you'd like to build on, or really like to go into further detail, feel free to put your hand up or also make a note in the chat, and Coco will call on you to speak. One says, less written exercises and more sharing circles, discussions directly with Indigenous peoples, an overview calendar so that we know what is coming up and we know why it's important, where inputs can make a difference. More accessible information sessions in accessible languages to understand how and when to participate. Easier process to participate. Oral and verbal ways to submit. More resources, personal and financial, for Indigenous peoples' organizations and representative institutions. Including LCIP's representatives in the UNFCCC national delegations. Thank you all so much for your contributions. We'll just wait one more moment. So if you have something you would like to submit, please feel free. This is really helpful for us to think about ways we can improve our communications and strengthen the platform even further. One more says, yes, overviews and information on how, when, and where to participate. Participation is crucial. More capacity building activities and dialogues among Indigenous peoples. Perfect. We'll just spend one more moment. And thank you so much, Graham, who has to hop off now, but we really, really appreciate your remarks. Perfect. Okay, a flurry have come through. That the UNFCCC urged countries to commit local instances in which their proposals should be incorporated directly into public policies on climate change. Make good use of the work done under the activities of the FWG so far. Overviews and information on how, when, and where to participate. Participation is crucial. More capacity building activities and dialogues among Indigenous peoples. Have previous meetings with national and regional Indigenous organizations separately to warm them up, besides specific funds, would be of great importance. ensure the translation of documents, reports, meetings, and events, financial and technical support for Indigenous peoples and local communities' participation. Perfect, and we'll just spend one more moment so that everyone has time to submit their responses to these questions. But as mentioned again, we've shared the email of the LCIPP in the chat. So please always feel free to reach out to us via email if there's anything that you've thought of that comes up in the coming days and you'd like to share. All right, one more moment and then we'll transition back into the dialogue. Wonderful, thank you so much. And we'll transition the floor back to Coco.
Wonderful, really appreciate that, Nina. And everyone, thank you for your feedback. We should do this not every day, but often. You are really the heart of the work here. And so do send your feedback. Also, it doesn't have to be good feedback. We want to hear from you and we want to hear whatever the secretary can do to make it easier for you to contribute. You'll notice, by the way, that we call you contributors. We don't call you observers as in almost everywhere else in the Unfccc world, because we really have learned. I hear circles of discussion, and when we have FWG meetings, you notice the format isn't a circle. You contribute and your leadership is valuable, and it makes a really big difference. We're doing something different here. So back to you. We have still have a little bit of time. We don't have to use all of it if you have other things to do, but the time's now back to you to continue our dialogue. If you have questions, things that you want to kind of air, it's all over to you. So we'll just wait for a moment if any of you want to hop in. Thank you, Graham, by the way. We really appreciate your hopping in earlier. And Ricardo, I see your hand. Was that an old hand or a new hand?
Sorry for that.
Old hand. Okay. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Hindu, please hop on in.
Hi, Coco. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this session. And it's really great to see, even with this difficult time, there is a willingness to continue the activities of the LCIPP. So just my reaction also will be a little bit similar to what the result of the Montees come out. As you can see in the participation list, I mean, all the activities of the LCIPP, it's very limited for many of the Indigenous regions participant, and if I can be allowed to the African Indigenous peoples, and then also like the Pacific peoples, so to really get involved. And I think the limit also might be from the language participation. Of course, it is online, and for that one, I'm not sure we can get any other solution right now because of the COVID, but online meetings, it's not helpful for the broader participation of partners that working with Indigenous peoples, and also for the Indigenous peoples to get involved. So my proposition maybe for the next time, it will be very interesting to see how maybe from the Secretariat side to join some of the regional consultation that we are organizing in another term, and then to give those kind of update. I give you the examples like the during the permanent forum, we organize all the 7 regions Indigenous peoples consultation. even it was online, but it's especially dedicated to the regions. And then we invite some people that come in. And then for the LCIPP, as you know, it's just like coming very fast. So we just did it from our side, like our members that give the update. And then other meetings are coming on, like the food summit, that regional consultation are happening. I know Andrea is coordinating to have one of the regional dialogue. And then there is also the preparation of the COP that some regional dialogues have been organizing. So maybe it will be good that you really get in contact with a regional representative or whatever and explore the possibility of having at least 5 or 10 minutes. And then as UNFCCC Secretariat, you also part of the UN, some of you speak the UN languages, and then you can dedicate this person to attend the regional dialogue with the language that the peoples can understand and give this kind of update in order to actually implement the activity 12, because we need to implement it of the facilitated working group. So it's dissemination of the local communities and indigenous peoples platform information. So that's all what I wanted to say, and it's really good to even read the names of many colleagues, friends from the government side. I saw all of you, I say hi, and also from the civil society and indigenous communities.
Hindu, thanks so much. And Marta, I don't know if you're still, Marta, yes, you are. Marta, would you like to hop in? Thanks, Hindu. Really appreciate those suggestions. Marta? Just wait one moment for Marta to hop in. It may be Marta also, okay. Marta also put a comment in the chat box. She didn't want to hop in, which is completely fine. Wonderful. Thank you, Marta, for sharing your thoughts in the chat box. Lovely. We'll wait just a moment. If anyone else would like to hop into the dialogue.
This is Marta Benavides, El Salvador.
Sure. Hi, Marta.
Hi. I see, you know, I will be 78 in November, and I am so happy and thankful that this process is coming along and in the way that's coming along. And we really, really need to be very ready to have the inputs into this time, into this process, because this is a time that life is really calling for us to really have our presence. And decolonization is what we need to do, but most people don't really even know, even those who come from communities or nations where the majority are indigenous peoples and descendants. So I urge all of us to be ready, because we got to be about the care of the planet, nature, and peoples. This is what really peace is all about. And we don't need a piece of peace. We need to be at peace with all of nature and amongst ourselves for now and to the future. Take care. This is Marta from El Salvador.
Marta, thank you. That was very heartfelt. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Please take care. And everyone, what we'll do this time is really just for you. We tried to be generous in scheduling time because we didn't want to have too little time. So what I would suggest is that we just wait. And if you want to speak amongst yourselves, you also don't have to talk to us, the Secretariat. You're welcome to use the time. And if,
Coco.
Yes, please, Pasang.
Hi, Coco. Do you hear me?
Perfectly, loud and clear.
Yeah. Yeah, internet is very fluctuating, so I'll just keep the video off. Hi, everyone, and good evening. This is a very hard time for all of us. especially in Nepal, the impacts of COVID is really badly been hit. We all are just hoping that everything will be fine and the normal situation will be back to us again. It's a very hard. Everything's been shut down. Not even the groceries. Everything's been shut down. So so in this situation again, we try to be strong and try to catch up meetings and also other things. So and thank you very much, Coco, and all the secretariat for your wonderful presentation. And that has been really, really helpful for to understand and to make aware what FWG is doing and what is the status of our activities and why it is important and what we are going to do or what the activities we have ahead in COP. So all these things has been really refreshing for us. It's very good. For that one, and also organizing this meeting because every time we are always tied off with the time and concentrating on one text and like that. And today is a really open space to speak from your heart and speak from your experience and speak why it is important. So I think this kind of dialogue, this kind of space is very important. But as we are all aware that challenges is internet, I was so happy that now my internet is a little bit better. Because I hardly could hear, but I could not be away from you, even the fluctuation of internet. So I just would like to highlight that this FW is very important for all of us to work very hard together, and especially our individual role and responsibilities at home, back home. Working with the governments, working with the different bilateral agencies, and also collecting all this experience to share in the global forum, especially in the global discourse led by the UN FWG. This one. So the implementation of this platform to connecting our global and national and even the local level is very, very important. And we are really thankful that at least the historical journey of Indigenous people that started in 1992, at least we have some hope of recognition of Indigenous knowledge and cultural practices and our value system, especially in the discourse of the even the nature-based solution that has been one of the priority of Unfccc and also CBD and also other platform and other discourse dealing with the climate change. So I just would like to highlight that, request all our participants, all our friends, all our colleagues who are contributors, as you said earlier, that we join hands together to support Indigenous peoples and local communities, and also acknowledge and the role and contribution of our knowledge and value system and our customer institution and governance system. And that was the basis of the nature-based solution and for a long-term climate change resilience to deal with this, all this chaotic situation. So this is very important for all of us to understand, and not only to understand, but also make a decision accordingly, so that the continuation of this such important practices will be continued by our next generation. So with this one, I would like to thank once again. Thank you so much for all your presence here to make it very effective, very productive. And I would like to thank Coco and whole secretariat for your really being so patient and trying to listen and trying to clarify everything, really passionately. So this is we are really fortunate to have your supports and also the wonderful feedbacks from all the participants in the mentor that Nina just collected, and that was also helpful for us to open up in the future, and helpful for us to think about it when we start working on another 3 years work plan. Thank you very much, Coco, and have a wonderful day. Yeah.
Pasang, thank you so much. And we could hear you loud and clear. I know these days it's not easy to get a good, stable wireless connection. So just so you know, we heard everything. Thank you so much. And thanks for the kind words. the team. I work with some amazing people, as you know, Chad and Joanna and Wissam and Nina. It's for me personally very humbling to get to work with all of you. I have, like I said before, everything to learn, and it's a wonderful opportunity. Speaking for maybe all of us, we really appreciate it. We'll wait just a moment to make sure that you've had a chance to talk. And maybe I have a question for you. Is it clear to all of you how you can raise your voice at FWG5? That's the next meeting of this committee that you all know about, the facilitative working group. Is it clear for all of you how you can raise your voice as contributors? If not, I'll give you some ideas. Many of you are really effective advocates. And so what I'm saying, just throw it out the window because you know how to do things so much better. In a short while, but here's some ideas, if you're wondering. In a short while, the FWG co-chairs will allow us as the Secretariat to put the agenda, the draft agenda for the meeting online. And what all of you can do, first of all, our website, the Unfccc, isn't always the easiest to navigate. So always write to us if you can't find things. But the agenda will go online. And what you can do is look at that agenda and see where the things come up on what day, at what time that you really care about. And as Andrea said, the co-chairs, Andrea and Yo, have really fought to get enough time for contributors to speak. We even booked translation for extra time during the meeting. And we know it's not that easy. It's one of these online meetings over 4 days. And I know that's not optimal. It's always better to be together, but it is what it is. But what you can do is look at that agenda, find out when the things come up that you really care about. And in advance, spend a moment or two thinking, what feedback would you like to give? Almost like that Menti activity that we just had, your feedback really matters. And the Secretariat is listening and documenting everything. And then we bring it back to the FWG so that nothing gets lost. Everything, gets back to them. And they're there listening. So think in advance, what feedback would you like to give? And then looking forward, as all of you know, this is a really important moment. FWG is thinking about what should the next work plan look like. So this is also a wonderful time for all of you to bring in your ideas. Talk amongst yourselves. You're very, very well networked and cooperating anyway all of the time. So think a little bit in advance, and Andrea really pointed you in this direction. I just want to repeat some of the things that she said. Think in advance. And those times, especially for contributors in the agenda of the FWG5, those are opportune moments for you to ask for the floor or ask for the microphone, since we're not all together. Ask for the microphone and share your ideas in a minute or 2 or 3. That would be really wonderful. And by doing that, by raising your voice, by thinking ahead, and using that time in FWG5 to contribute your ideas, you can do a lot. You can really support the FWG in this big job that they have to do. That's one of many opportunities. But just in case you're wondering how can you really make a difference, that's one. Now I'll be quiet. Oh, I see. How can we register for FWG5? Wissam, could I pull you in and could you explain to everyone how to register for FWG5? Otherwise, I would just say write to Wissam, but Wissam, there may be many people who want to know. Would you like to hop in and explain that?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Coco, for the opportunity. I would just quickly mention that for FWG5, we already have, we started our registrations, as you know, following the notification that was sent from the Secretariat to party, IGOs and UN and NGOs. So for NGOs, you may please go through your IPs, so your constituency, and for UN IGOs and parties, they come through our email address, the lcipp@unfcc.int, and from there we share our registration form. You complete that form, and then you get registered and go through the process. Thank you. If there are any questions, of course, you can still send to our LCIPP account, and then we get back to you with any further clarification.
That's great. Thanks so much, Wissam. Okay, super. We can also, for those who are interested, we can also send a follow-up email. After this session, we're going to send all of you a link and maybe the PowerPoint. If you're interested, we can also put in that information so you'll have it in one place. Okay, wonderful. I'm just going to be quiet for once. And if any of you want to ask a question or express a view, please do. And for all of you, you spent so much time with us. It's really generous. Thank you for sharing your time. We'll wait just a little bit, maybe another 5 minutes, and then we can draw our meeting to a close.
No, Coco, if no one is, maybe I'll just use this time. If no one is speaking for a few minutes, yeah, when my internet is getting a little bit stable.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, I just would like to share my own little bit experience of how important this FWG for Indigenous people. Because you know, for Indigenous people have been always seen like you know, oh, they are like activists, or you know, always you know, on the street, or some kind of connotation is there, right? But this FWG has really helped to also make the state parties to understand that the Indigenous peoples are not just you know, not been seen in that way, but also contributor, or you know, the contributor for the whole climate discourse, but also the solution to climate change. And that has been hardly been gone to the negotiators' mind, in my experience. No, despite we have a caucus, we have a forum, we have been shouting, we have been fighting, we have been raising our issues, but our concerns from the perspective of the negotiator, or state parties, or governments is hardly been tossed upon, right? So, but this FWG has created in such a space that even the state party started to think, oh, okay, oh, this is like FWG is like you know, there's Indigenous people working along with the state party, so we should listen. Or this kind of you know, kind of thoughts I have seen in the state parties, even in my country's state parties, even in the other government agency whom I know, even who are my friends, and they started questioning. So I think this is the opportunity, but we also have a lot of challenges that as you know, this is a technical body that we cannot influence the negotiators directly, but we also need to, we are also, it's very important that we also strategize ourselves, that how we work with the caucus, but also with a whole different bunch of the negotiators. You know, there are layers and layers of different ways for influencing, for addressing our issues and concerns. So from that part, I think like despite there are challenges, but if we are strategize ourselves, and also implementation of this 12 activities, I think we have a lot of space to influence the state parties, that why it is important. And now this is the century that you know, we cannot move ahead by ignoring Indigenous people concerns, Indigenous people's traditional livelihoods, our cultural practices, that is really, really pertinent for you know, long-term solution to the climate change. Coco, I just wanted to use this space because no one was raising hands. Yeah, and thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. It's been very informative. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. Maybe as just a final word, this is from WISM. WISM says we can still accept registration. Joanna and Chad asked me to remind you of the 2 LCIPP events, one on the 3rd and one on the 10th. You'll see that in our follow-up information. Would love for you to attend. Parties will be there, and this is a really good chance as you participate in those activities to help parties, a little bit like what Pasang just said, help parties understand the value that you have to offer. You are leaders, and your unique values and your experiences, the way, I'm not trying to say us, them, but I'm just learning from you. You have so much to contribute. Not all of the process thinks and acts like you do, and we have everything to learn. So I just really encourage you as much as possible to participate. I also know you're really busy, but whatever we can do as a secretariat to make your lives a little bit easier, please do let us know. Andrea, Yo, is there anything, as our fearless co-chairs, would you like to add anything before we close, or the team? Putting you on the spot a little bit.
Thank you, Coco. And no, that's okay. I really appreciate everybody's participation. All of the participants here represent expertise in their own experience from their own peoples and communities, from their own, in many cases, decades of work focusing on the issues that we're addressing here. So I thought this was a really good session, and we hope that everybody signs up to participate at the 5th session of the Facilitative Working Group. And as Coco mentioned, we have myself and my co-chair, Yo Mulalap, have made every effort to include much more time than we had in previous sessions for all of your input and participation, including a designated time at the end of each of the 4 days, which will just be for your input and contributions, just to make sure that what happened previously, where there wasn't really time for any of us to say anything on some of the very important topics. So I wanted to thank our secretariat. They're very hardworking and very supportive of the work of the co-chairs, and we look forward to our future work together. Joko Tessia.
Super. Thank you so much, everyone. Ricardo, you asked a question about the participants list. I don't know that answer, but I've asked WISM to follow up with you to get an answer to that question. With that, everyone have a wonderful whatever time of day it is. For some of you, it's already quite late, and some of you still have a whole day ahead of you. So please keep safe. We hope to see you soon. It's been terrific to hear from you, and we'll keep working together on this work. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Coco.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Hindu. Bye.
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
friends.
everyone.
Thank you, Coco.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.